Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and hey, we're the She-Squatchers. I'm Jen Cruz, your host, and I've got my trusty teammates on the line. I've got Jenna Grover.
Hello.
And Tammy Trikel.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, we have an awesome guest for you tonight. We've got Donell Barlow with us. And hey, Donell, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, welcome to the show. We're so excited that you could come on and share with us. Could you just tell the listeners a little bit about your background, where you come from?
So I am an enrolled member of the Ottawa Tribe Otter clan out of Miami, Oklahoma. And then on my maternal side, I am a Yurok. I'm not a tribal member, but I am Yurok on my mother's side out of Northern California. And I live in Spokane, Washington, and I reside on the ancestral lands of the Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, Kalispel, and Colville Confederated tribes. And I'm an author, I'm a holistic health coach and a nutrition consultant, and many other, actually. I do a lot of other things.
Awesome. I know that
you jack of all trades.
Yeah. I like wearing hats, and I do actually like wearing a lot of actual hats too, but yeah. So
awesome. So did you write a Bigfoot book?
Yes, I have it here. I wanted to make sure we had visuals ready to go. So this was my first children's book called Bigfoot and Lightning Bug. And I wrote this when I was pregnant with my daughter. And so that's when kind of the imagery came to me. And it's based upon my grandmother's stories which we'll get into, obviously, what she would tell me growing up about Bigfoot and the experiences that she had. And that was always really special and sacred to me. And so this was a way for me to honor some of those teachings. And then also just a beautiful way to bring my daughter into this world. And I'm a single parent. And so in this book too, not everyone will notice, but certain kids will, that it's just like a mother and daughter, so I thought that was also a really, a special way to have some representation too, because that's not something we always see in children's books.
That's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's awesome. And so what age is the recommended age for your book?
Well, I mean, it kind of just depends because like the really little kids love it. Obviously, they're not able to read it because I would say for a child who could read it on their own, they would probably need to be around 9, about 8 or 9. But, it's some of the littlest kids, that I come across that just love being read to, And so I say usually about 3 years old to, 7 is probably the typical age group that I see that gravitates the most towards the Bigfoot, because I was doing a lot of readings before COVID, and that was a lot of the age of kids that I was working with.
That's awesome. I love that. Mm-hmm. So where can people find your book?
My book is on Amazon. So there's 2 different options. Well, there's also the Kindle, but you can do the hardcover, which, most people prefer a hardcover because kids are pretty crazy with their books, right? And then there's also a soft cover option, and then a Kindle option. And then you can also get the books directly from me. So sometimes people want a signed copy. I also will include a sticker if you order directly through me. I have Bigfoot and Lightning Bug stickers. And then if you're local in Spokane, Washington, I sell it at a few different stores in town.
Wonderful. I can't wait to meet you and when we go out to Washington and Yakima. And you're going to be there too, right?
Yep. be there with the booth, and I'll be doing readings and activities with the kids. So
I love it. I love it. That's going to be awesome.
yeah, I can't wait.
I'm excited. Oh, all the awesome people we get to meet out there when we go, girls. It's been a long time coming. They keep putting it off because of
Yeah.
COVID. So it's just making us anticipate even more. So
We want to
our
go back
excitement,
so much.
we love Washington
We do.
State.
It's
Oh,
gorgeous.
good.
It's gorgeous there.
Yeah, yeah. So we're looking forward to it for sure. So I'm excited.
Me
I-
too.
Yeah, yeah. We get to be with people who share stories like our own and like-minded people. That's always fun. That's always fun. So I was hearing that your grandmother used to share stories with you.
Mhm.
She was your native grandmother, right?
Yes, I'm native on both sides of my family. I am mixed, but I'm still, yeah, I'm native on both sides. So she was Yurok, and she also was a master basket weaver. And so I do talk about that in the book a little bit. So my grandmother was out gathering materials, a lot. And she lived along the Klamath River, which is part of the Yurok Reservation. And her and my grandfather owned a logging company. And that one of the main interactions that they would deal with is getting their logging equipment turned over.
Oh,
Yeah, because Bigfoot doesn't like that. Which is, that's fair and that's very valid. So they would come out and they would have various footprints, different sizes too. So, she would talk about that it wasn't just like a Bigfoot living in solitude, which I think we often think. Like she would see different sizes of footprints as if they're, were families that were together. And then she would make plaster footprints of the ones that that were still quality, which is pretty cool too.
that is cool.
Yeah.
How she must have made many, many, many. Are they? I mean, do you still have some?
Yeah, I only have one. I don't know what happened to all the others, but yeah, I still do have one, and it's like it's one of the most special things that I could, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things that it's only been in her hands, my sister's and mine. So it's very, very special to me. And yeah, and it came from, one of those times that she had dealt with with them turning over the equipment. And then she would also talk about, so when they were building their house out there, they had to live like kind of in a trailer situation, while they were building out there. And she said there was an instance when at least one had come out and was shaking the trailer. Yeah.
Wow, and they were in it.
And they were in it.
I've heard of that happening more than.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's gotta be kind of scary though. I mean,
yeah.
was she scared?
Yes and no, because my grandmother, she understood, she grew up in her traditional teachings, and she understood why there would be an issue because of what they were doing, even though that was their way of living. She never said anything about, of course, she probably didn't really like the interaction, but she never said that she felt threatened by any of her interactions. At least I never got that impression from the stories that I grew up hearing, because she would go out and communicate with them. She told me that she would bang on trees with sticks, and that's how she would communicate with them and kind of knowing where they were.
So, just to know where they were, not to feed them or
or even for her to maybe out of respect to let them know, not like they don't know, because they know, but to kind of also let them know where she was. So, she obviously was actively encouraging some activity too by doing that. So that doesn't make me feel like she felt, threatened, if that makes sense. We understood, just as Holly talked about in your other podcast with her, that they are protectors of the forest, and so that's basically what they're doing, and that also includes the trees. And even though, my family was native, they were, that was still part of what they were doing. And it's understandable why they would have an issue with that, industry. So
So did they ever do anything about all of these being flipped over, the machinery? And
As far as I know, they continue to like having to, get it flipped back over and get back to work.
oh
It
my
never
goodness.
stopped them. I was able to go back there before I had my daughter. So it was about 5 years ago. And I didn't know where this location was, but I ended up staying with this woman who knew my grandparents just by chance. Like by total chance, I ended up meeting her the year before and she told me I could stay with her. And then I mentioned my grandmother's name and she said, I know who your grandparents were. And so I went down to the land where they lived and I saw one of the old logging trucks and it had their name painted on the side. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy, like
That's
this
really
is
neat.
where this stuff happened.
That's really neat. That's really
Putting
neat.
a place to the memory or the story.
And it's not in our family anymore, but I didn't care. I was like, whatever, you can come out here and find me. I'm going out here. I know it says private now, but I'm like, I'm going to do it anyways. So it was really really special to be able to go out there and to walk that land and just to know that that's where my mother grew up, and just to connect in that way. It was unexpected. I had no idea that I was going to be able to go to that place where I heard all those stories.
Was it emotional?
Well, the entire trip was emotional, within itself, just because, I lost my mom when I was 7, and so I haven't been with her for that long. And then my grandmother passed when I was a teenager, and so just for me to go back there in that place where my mother was raised and my grandmother was raised and where they grew up, and just connecting with that land was very emotional for me.
Oh, wow.
But it was like happy tears.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped out of there for a minute. My program just shut off all of a sudden. I'm glad you're all still there.
Yeah. I actually just now noticed after she was talking, I just now noticed you were frozen. I was like, oh.
Oh no, I wasn't.
Is she not there?
I wasn't frozen. It actually shut off.
Again. Oh my
It shut
goodness.
off again. It happened twice before we went on the air, so I don't know what it is. I upgraded to the new Windows 11.
I did too.
Maybe that's the problem. I don't know, but this is the first time I've tried to use Skype since I did that. So maybe they'll work out the kinks.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad it's still working though. Anyway, yeah. So were there other stories that she shared with you? Like,
as far as Bigfoot, not a whole lot of other stories. I mean, she obviously said their smell was pungent. Like you're gonna know. Like it's the most pungent smell you're ever gonna smell in your life. So if one's around. But she talked also about because I know this is kind of like a paranormal show. So, and oftentimes, I don't know if a lot of people make these connections, but there's often UFOs that are connected with Bigfoot. There'll be sightings in similar places. And so she had mentioned once about, she thought that it was like they were having an earthquake, because the house was shaking like crazy. The whole entire house was shaking. She thought it was an earthquake. But then she felt this huge weight land on the roof of her house. And then a beam of light went through one window to the next. And it was there just for not a real long period of time. And then it just took off. It was like there and then it was gone. And then she mentioned, and she told me this story when I was really young. And then she mentioned the next day she had some men in black show up to her house in black suits, like the men in black.
oh wow, what
Tell
did
me
they
more.
say?
Yeah. And she told me that they confirmed that it was a UFO.
Oh wow. And
Did
what
they
else? What did they look funny? I mean, I've heard
She
some
didn't say
stories.
anything about like their way their faces looked, but she said the two men were dressed in black suits.
and
Okay.
what did they tell her? I mean, did they tell her keep it quiet, or did they just
I didn't know that she didn't mention anything about them saying keep it quiet.
Oh.
Which was interesting. I mean, she didn't say that in the story that she told me, but they just went out there and told her that was what had happened, and she's in the middle of nowhere, you know, like this is not easy area to get to. It's a lot of windy roads. It's really foggy, not fun to drive in bad weather conditions. But she said they showed up the very next day and said that it was.
What was the thump on the roof? Was it
They were
ship, or did they get out?
House. That's what she was assuming, is that it had landed on the house.
Oh, wow.
Possibly, or maybe it was just hanging above. She never went outside. My mom was an infant when it happened, so she was just a baby when it happened. And then she mentioned that beam of light going through the house, but she didn't come outside.
So did she see the UFO?
She never saw it herself.
Okay. What color was the beam of light?
I don't know. I don't think she ever described that one to me, to be honest. I'm not sure. I mean, I always pictured it as like a yellow, whitish kind of color of light. Nothing that I feel like if it was colorful, like if it was blue or red or green, she would have said that.
Yeah.
You know? And so I just assumed it was like a white or a yellow kind of lighting. Otherwise, I think she would have said specifically it was this color.
That makes sense.
But I don't wanted to leave like my mom in the house. I think she just felt better staying inside. I'm assuming. So yeah, I would have gone outside though if I had been her. But
you might have gotten taken.
Well, yeah, maybe it's possible.
But you know, we have seen it.
We have different. And this is also something that you'll see a lot depending on the interpretation. So like. My family was converted, you know, and so sometimes when that happens, when you're converted and now, you practice organized religion, sometimes you can view those things in a different way, if that makes sense. And so I feel like that could play into possibly, how she decided to interact or not interact with it.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're different.
I feel like the people who are like more traditional Native people on reservations are much more comfortable with the idea of having visitors from somewhere else. And
so you're right. They're much more comfortable. And also, like, if you come from that fear, right, then you're always going to think any interaction is negative because you're coming from a fear-based place when it comes to the paranormal, which is something I often see. It's not all the time, but I often see that those things are connected, just within my own experience and people I know that I share things with and kind of what their spiritual beliefs are. And so I do think that the two of us would interact very differently to just any paranormal encounter.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure back then too, it was not even probably even talked about that much. I mean, because
she didn't talk about it much at all until she was much older in her adulthood. She didn't feel comfortable that people would think she was, crazy and.
Did she tell people about something landing on her house? Is that how the Men in Black found out about it, or did they just show up and she hadn't told anybody?
Told.
What?
I don't think there's anybody she could have told. I mean, that was like, if my grandma was alive, oh man, how old would she be? She would be like 100 and something, like, she was on the reservation. So it'd be really difficult for her, to go out to tell it'd be hard to communicate to tell anybody. It's just one of the things where it's like, from my understanding, the Men in Black, they know, they're tracking it. So they're going to know where to go.
Oh, that's neat. That's really neat.
To learn about them and then to later like realize that's a real thing, I was just like blown away,
Yes.
Go back in your room.
Okay. We have a visitor.
Yeah. Different visitor.
Different kind.
Yeah. She's cute. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That would be so interesting to have done. What happened with your grandma, I should say, have done to you. But so I'm just wondering, it was just her and her daughter then, or was
I had a grandfather, like, but I don't know, like, I only met him a couple times in my entire life. And I don't know if he was around during that time. You know what I mean? I have no idea because I didn't get raised around him. And so like, and they didn't have a good relationship. So she never talked about his involvement
Oh.
when it comes to that kind of stuff.
So she had to be the strong woman.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So that's kind of where I feel like our experiences with the paranormal begin. I've also come to notice, just because I'm obsessed with the paranormal and I'm always watching shows and reading books and doing things as well, my own research, that it can kind of run in families, especially with, you know, the extraterrestrial ET, little people, whatever you want to call them. And so I think that that's part of why I experience the things that I do directly with extraterrestrials, is because it's kind of in my family.
Ooh, are you going to tell us about this?
I can tell you things,
yeah, I would love to hear about that.
wild things. But yeah, so I've seen a few crafts just before. I've seen them at home. I've seen them when I've been in Arizona. You know, I've seen them in other places. I've probably seen about 3 or 4 crafts in my life. None of them were super close, but it was very obvious that it was not, you know, something that was man-made because of the way that they moved, or because of the type of lighting, you know, different things like that. I just knew that it was something otherworldly. But yeah, I've had some personal experiences, you know, in my home too. Last year I was outside with my neighbors and we were doing like a little fire. We like to build like little fires, and sometimes we'll do songs and stuff or work on a craft. And we were making rattles that night. And I saw a craft. None of them look at the sky. I'm obsessed with looking at the sky. So I'm always just like, what's going on? What's that? What's that? So I'm looking and I see one, and it's going really slow. And then as soon as I turn my gaze right on it, it stops, almost as if it's like, it knows that I'm watching it. And then it shoots off and goes a totally different direction. And I was like, okay, yep, that definitely was, you know, that was a UFO. And then that night I'm going to bed. I'm awake, not asleep yet, totally awake. And my daughter was only maybe 2 at the time, 1.5, 2 years old. And she was sleeping next to me, and I had my arm around her. And I'm just laying there in the dark, and I feel something come up from like almost underneath me and wrap its arms around me in my bed and is holding me there. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, holy cow, like what is happening? And I can't see anything. I'm not hearing anything. But it's holding me. And I felt, it was weird. I had mixed emotions because I felt a part of like, the hold was kind of a comforting hold. It wasn't like, you know, it didn't feel super aggressive, but also at the same time, like I couldn't see or hear what was going, you know, it wasn't saying anything to me. And it also kind of felt like I was going to be taken, is what it felt like. And so I pushed back against it just to kind of see if I could break it, you know, like move it or whatever. I wasn't paralyzed. And I noticed right away that I had no physical strength in comparison to whatever was holding me there. And it lasted maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. And then it was just gone. And I just knew that connection from what I saw in the sky that night. Like that was.
So you thought it was extraterrestrial and not like a spirit?
No, because I do experience spirits too. I see orbs, and I can also smell spirits sometimes. And I've seen a few actual spirits. And spirits don't typically touch me unless it's like my family. And like I've had family come back to me in spirit, and like when I'm grieving or something, like give me like a healing touch. And it's like, you know, that's your family, right? But like spirits don't typically touch me. And this like grabbed me, you know, and held on to me. And so it just, you know, if you've experienced those two things, they just feel different. Does it, you know, if that makes sense? They don't feel the same. And spirits, usually I can see them in some way, shape, or form, whether it's light or I can hear them moving around, or, you know what I mean? They're making some kind of noise or something where it's like, or a sight that I know that like, oh, that's a spirit.
And with your experiences with the extraterrestrials, are they usually silent?
Well, yeah, they're mostly silent, I would say, for the most part. Yeah. The only time I hear things, except for one time, is more in like a dream state than in a waking state. So just for whoever's watching this, you guys already know this, I'm sure, but like the dream world is a huge part of Native American spirituality, and it has been for a long time. It's how some of our tribes would fight their wars. It's how they would go and hunt. They would find a deer in their dream. They would ask for permission to hunt that deer that they needed to feed their family, and then they would go find it in that exact place the next day. And so the dream world is a very sacred place where we're able to tap into other dimensions and realities and connect with other entities or lost family members or whatever it is. And so since I was little, it's always been a place for me to meet with my family. And it's very easy for me to tap into, and I lucid dream easy. It's super easy for me to do. And so sometimes some of these encounters appear as a dream, but they're like still in my house or they're still in my bedroom. So it's not like I'm somewhere off in a dream world. It's like it's in my bedroom in this moment, if that makes sense. And so there's been times where this one time I had this crazy, so I took a nap, and I haven't taken a nap since. And because it was kind of creepy. It was an old apartment, and I took a nap, and in this dream, when I woke up, I could hear this weird language being spoken, but it wasn't like, like an indigenous language or another cultural language. It was like a different vibration, like different frequency. And I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And I was laying on my couch just like I was in my nap. So just like the middle of the day, taking a nap on the couch. That's what I was doing in the dream. And this thing was talking to me, and it was petting my head and petting my hair, almost like, the best way to describe it, I think, is like how Smeagol's obsessed with his precious. Do you know what I mean? That's what it felt like. And so it was like rubbing my head and touching my hair and talking in this language. And I was petrified. And it lasted a while. I don't know how, again, it's like hard to know when you're in those spaces, but it felt like it was like, 5 or 10 minutes that I was stuck in this place. I could have moved my head, but I was too scared. And so I was picking up that whatever this was a creature. It was not human, that it had multiple limbs is what it felt like. And I haven't taken a nap, I don't think, really since then. It was creepy, and when I woke up, I was like, that didn't feel like a dream. You know what I mean? So sometimes some of these things that appear as dreams, I feel like, are much more because we go into that subconscious level and we're able to tap into those other realities.
Yes, I actually tell Jen this. I call it the in-between place between being awake and being sleeping. And then I tell her, so please, I'm sorry, continue. So this is so awesome.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad. I hope you're liking this stuff because I know it's kind of different, but like, so this stuff happens, like I experience them a lot in that state. I've also woken up upside down, disoriented in my bed. Like I felt like I was drugged. I really felt like that was one time that I was taken for sure. I've never woken up upside down in my bed in my life. So for that to happen, and then also to be completely disoriented and like out of it, I was like, something's not right. You know what I mean? And so I think oftentimes abductees, you don't remember. Some people remember, but I think oftentimes we don't. And I've had other things come to me, which are just a little too personal to kind of confirm that some things have happened, in that way.
Awesome. These are good stories. I love this stuff. We are already halfway through the show. We have to go to our commercial break, so stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. All right, good.
You are doing fabulous.
Yes.
Thank you.
Goes so quick, doesn't it?
Paranormal activity consistently.
You experience paranormal
consistently.
I do too. I'm all the time.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to happen tonight. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I've seen UFOs on my street. I've had things grab me and all that stuff. But this shows it back to you. So
I know. I love that. I wish we could share all of. Well, when we see each other, we can get like.
We should definitely
share more of it. But there's one in particular. Like sometimes it can trigger me to cry. Because it's just that intense. But I would only share it with you guys like in person.
Yeah.
I have stories like that too that I don't tell the whole story because it's too personal.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell quite a bit of it, but not all of it because there's some parts that are like, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that completely. They're not for everybody, and I don't want certain people to hear it if they're not going to hear it in a
good way,
receptive way.
Mm-hmm.
30.
Thank you, Sarge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that I have a clock that tells me seconds on it now. Well, I guess there's one at the top of the screen too. Huh. Interesting. She's cute.
She's singing 5 Golden Rings right now.
Oh, cute.
Singing a song.
Are we back?
I said 15 seconds ago.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the show, everybody. Hey, we're the She-Squatchers. Will you check us out online at She-Squatchers.com? And right at the top of the page, you can click on the events and see where we're going to be. And I'm going to tell you what, in the spring, we are going to be in Yakima, in Toppenish, Washington, with our lovely guest tonight. She'll be there too. So you'll have to come out and meet us there if you can at all make that possible because it's going to be a really good time. So come check it out and meet us there. So back to the show. We've got lots more to talk about. So you were telling us about these experiences that you were having with like extraterrestrials. And I know you said you might have some stories about little people. Do you consider them the same thing?
I do in a way. I mean, oftentimes Native people will refer to extraterrestrials as little people. You know what I mean? You can kind of see that through both them using those terms. But because it's like extraterrestrials though is such a broad, you know what I mean? It's such a broad range of things. So it's like there's different races of extraterrestrials. So sometimes I wonder, are they talking about like the little gray men when they're talking about little people, But then also I've heard stories of them talking about even little people that like live underground. So then that's something that's totally different, right? We're not even talking about extraterrestrials now specifically. So I think sometimes we have to really clarify on that because it can get kind of confusing. But I do think of like people ask me what I think Bigfoot is and like how do I think that they're an extraterrestrial and I don't. I feel like Bigfoot is an interdimensional being. And so I'm going to use they, them pronouns for Bigfoot because Bigfoot can be either, right? And that Bigfoot can travel in between dimensions so that That's part of why we don't find them, you know what I mean, the way that they do, because they have that ability and they're very connected to source, which is also why I think that a lot of those sightings with UFOs also, we see them connected because they're connected to that higher source and be able to go through different dimensions. And then I was reading in another book about some indigenous teachings in South America and what their kind of perception was of Bigfoot. And they said that Bigfoot goes into an inner earth. And so when they want to get out from the outer world, that they go in, which is really interesting because that's not something that I was familiar with any of my teachings.
The elders from my tribe have said that they travel through the ground.
Mm.
And they'd say physical travel through the ground, instantaneous travel from one place to the other. And I'm like, are you talking like a tunnel and they're running like really fast? And they're like, no. Literally, it's like a portal through the ground from one place to another. But they go through the earth that way. So that might be something similar.
Definitely. I mean, that sounds also like they could just, go through another dimension, right? They're just doing it through the earth as opposed to another way. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've had Bigfoot come to me in my dreams, I wish that I have had, my personal experiences, but the first dream that I had, I was sitting in a car with a friend and the window was like partially rolled down and it was like a snowy day. And there was this big snowy hillside to my right and I was looking at it. And then out of the snow comes a Bigfoot, like he was kind of camouflaged in it. And he came out of the hillside and came over to me and put his hand through the open part of the window and patted me on the head. And it just felt like I felt my grandmother. I felt like that they were also a protector, you know what I mean? And it was just it felt like this really special, intimate in a way connection, for me to feel that. Like that was just, I was so excited when I woke up. I was like, oh.
That is awesome.
Meet, but that's close. That's good. At least we got to meet in the dream world.
That would be so exciting. I want to dream about Bigfoot.
Awesome. I've had dreams about Bigfoot before, but they were more like I was teaching somebody how to play with Bigfoot. And then they went back to those areas without me and they captured a baby. And then I was all upset that they took this Bigfoot baby and I went hunting them down. I'm like, you give that baby back. You can't take them. And I made them give the baby back. But I mean, that just changed my whole perspective of what we're doing. Like I said, if we found a Bigfoot village, we wouldn't tell people where it is.
Oh, no. I've dreamt about a Bigfoot village before. Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah. Oh, and I'm all with Holly. Like, I mean, I would like people to believe, but I'm also not here to convince you. You know what I mean? It's like, right? Yeah. So it's like, to me, I'm like, you're ridiculous for not thinking that there's not the possibility of other things out there, right? But I get that it challenges people's core beliefs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why a lot of people refuse to do it. But again, I'm not here to convince you. But yeah, I would definitely hide them at all costs, like Holly had mentioned.
Mm-hmm. She's so cute. She was telling us about how she just sweepers those little tracks away. She's so cute.
I would do the same thing.
Oh.
If I had, access the way she does, because she lives in, Bigfoot country. I live in the city, so, we have the woods and stuff here, but they're not over here. So, yeah.
We do have a question in the chat room from Sherry, and she's asking, can aliens activate one's psychic abilities?
I think definitely they can, because they have abilities that we don't have from the other dimensions. Because you can get from different sources how many dimensions there are, but I'm familiar with about 12, and we're in like the third dimension. Okay, just to give some reference there. And so it's very dense and it's very physical. And then as you go up in the dimensions, it's less physical and becomes more energy and more spirit. And so these kind of entities, yes, they have those abilities. And I think when we're receptive to them, they definitely could increase your psychic abilities. I mean, that's part of why I know some people meditate And I've heard language. I've heard entities speaking to each other during meditation.
Is that the E5?
I've done that.
Talking about? Oh,
Yeah.
you have. Okay.
5. But and it's interesting, and I loved his work and I loved his documentaries and stuff, but it was just me just doing like one of my regular meditation type of things, and I was tripped out. I didn't want to move because I was like, what's, something's going to change, and so, but I could hear these two things speaking to each other, and I knew that it was a type of extraterrestrial of sorts. It wasn't a language that I was familiar with at all. But I definitely think they can. I mean, they have those psychic abilities, right? And I think we once had them too. But we've lost who we are. We've forgotten who we are. And
I think everybody has the ability. They just forgot how, to access that.
And I don't know if like what your tribe's history is on like but we call them star ancestors. That's really that's how I like to address extraterrestrials, because there's a lot of teachings that come from like that. We actually came from the stars and we learned to navigate through them. They taught us how to map out the sky. And even some of our teachings around plant medicine came from that, from my understanding too. And so I like to look at them as those star ancestors that passed on some of that knowledge onto my ancestors. And then that's part of why they're coming back here to connect with us again and make sure that we're protecting the earth. Like that's our responsibility.
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm. So many people ask us if Bigfoot is an alien. And I'm like, if you look at all the critters on the planet, we're the one that doesn't fit in. It's us. We're probably the one that is alien here.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, what? What?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. But
did you just get cut out, Jen? Did everybody else hear Jen?
Yeah, it just glitched just a little bit.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to hear everything you said.
I just said that people ask how long Bigfoot has been here, like he doesn't belong here, and I'm like, well, how long have humans been here? If you can't answer that question, I think it's an odd idea that we would think that they're not from here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything that's here is from here and was meant to be here. So who are we to say what is meant here, right?
Right.
So, it goes back to that, like all things have their purpose and everything's interconnected. And so when we finally grasp that concept, then we're actually open to receive, more things coming in from other dimensions. That's why you guys have those personal experiences, because you're open.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also has to do with the love and the respect you have for the earth and yourself and energy. And sorry, Jen, go on.
Oh, I can't remember. I was just into what you were saying then. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Like,
talk about love. Talk about love around Jen. She gets sidetracked.
Yeah.
Love.
Well, like that's part of too, like that whole thing of attracting them. So they can measure the magnetic field around our bodies, right? And so from our head, it measures out to 3 inches. From our heart, it measures out to 3 feet, which is incredible, right? And so when we really put that into work, when we're really when you're in that inner space and you're meditating and or whatever it is that you're doing, you don't have to call it meditating, but you're activating that heart, like other things pick that up, besides humans. So,
well, animals can read us. I mean, animals know when to come by us and when not to.
Yeah. And that's how I kind of judge too, because it's like, obviously, yes, I don't like using the words good and bad or like evil. And I kind of just say, or even light and dark. I don't like using those types of labels because I think that duality is necessary. I think most things that come to us, if we're in a good place, are positive. It's just we get fearful. And then because it's unknown, and that's often what it is, right? We know if something comes and it's like not good, you know without a doubt. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that too. And so I'm really about changing that narrative of making all of these paranormal experiences seem like they're negative or that should promote fear.
Yes, me too. For me, it's not everything that is a dark entity is an evil entity. You have to have the shadow, and it's easier for some entities to form as shadow because it takes a lot more energy to form as light. So maybe they're new, maybe that's why they come dark first. It's just I just can't get on board with, oh, it's dark, it's negative, it's a demon. No.
Yeah, I'm with you. And from teaching that I had recently, sometimes we don't listen to those light beings. We don't listen. It takes the duality of what we perceive as dark to actually make a shift.
Well, that's true even with dreams. You can have a good dream, wake up and not remember it, but you have a scary dream that scares the crap out of you. You remember every single thing about that dream. So I always say there's probably some really good messages hidden in those scary dreams because they know we're going to remember them.
100%. And that duality exists in everything, right? And it's necessary. And they say that's when the magic's the strongest, is at night when we're still. And when we go into sweat lodge, it's dark. We go into that darkness in order to receive what we need. And so it's trusting in that. And it's necessary.
I had a really cool experience I've been in Sweat Lodge many times, but I was teaching a Reiki class one weekend, and then one of my friends said, Jen, you have to come to Sweat. I'm like, I'm teaching a class. I can't come to Sweat. She's like, no, we're doing a ceremony, and I have something that I'm thanking you for. You have to come for that part at least. And I'm like, okay. So I told the girls in my class, I said, I need to go to the Sweat Lodge for a little while. You can just take a break and do whatever you want, or you can come with me. I don't care. So they're like, we're going. They wanted to go. And so we all went in. Thankfully, I had enough skirts to pass around, and we all went in, and it was their first experience in Sweat Lodge. And what was really neat for them is we all saw the exact same visions in there. All of us saw the same thing in order. And they were just blown away by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's incredible. You know what I mean? That whole experience, but it takes you having to trust in that darkness and sit in that darkness and in that suffering to receive it. I've had some pretty crazy paranormal stuff happen within the sweat too.
Can we do a sweat while we're in Yakima?
You could, Holly might be able to arrange something over there.
That would be amazing, because I know that I have not, and I don't think Jenna has been in a sweat either.
No, I haven't, but I know that there's different lengths of time. I don't think I could do a sweat for like 30 minutes to an hour. I don't know.
There's 4 doors. They open the door 4 times. So it cools off for a minute, and then you have a break and you go back. It's like 4 sections.
Okay.
I think, that's how we do it here. It might be different elsewhere.
Yeah, you go 4 rounds, and so you come out in between rounds typically.
And how long?
There's time though, because it just depends on how many people there are, how many prayers they have. Like, you don't actually know how long. And it really is like the most intimate way to, I feel like, express things in a sisterhood with other women, because you're praying with other women out loud. And that's not something you do in any other setting in that way. And so it's very intimate, and it's very
powerful.
And I typically will fast before I sweat. And that also helps me see a lot more when I'm in there, to help kind of just make it sure that I'm clean and ready to go. It makes it harder, but that's part of it, But yeah, you might be able to make something happen. When you guys are over there, you'll have to.
I think that would be a very powerful experience.
Yes, it would. It would be amazing.
My favorite is to sweat in the snow, because then you can come out and cool off.
Go back in again, because it's just so cold. You're just like, it's too cold out here. Yeah.
For sure. That's fun. Anyway, well, I wanted to ask you more about little people. Like, have you had any experiences with like the little people from the forest, or?
Not any personal experiences like with actual like little people. I've had a dream about a little person, but not like a physical, in this reality. But sometimes, I think that the dream state reality is more real than this one.
Can be.
Yeah.
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 I know I'm a seer, and it started for me as dreams, and then it turned into like waking visions over my eyes are open and I'm seeing something over top of that, like a movie or something over top of what's really here. And my native elder, I would always tell him what I saw, and I felt very comfortable doing that. But when he passed, I didn't know who to tell or if I should tell. And then, so I wasn't saying anything to anybody because I'm like, well, they have their own people that would know that stuff. And then his uncle came to me at a powwow and like told me to sit down because he was very short and I'm very tall. He's like, you sit. And he was like scolding me for not telling, for not telling my visions. He says, we're walking blind through this world. That's how we know what way to go. So we can avoid those troublesome paths. That's how we know that if people tell us their visions. And we're in trouble because nobody's telling them. They're not having them anymore, or they're not telling. And he was just, and I was like, oh, I am in trouble. So that, after that, I told him my visions after that. So yeah. But I found out a lot of them are dreamers and don't move into the waking part. And I think it's probably because of my profession and the amount of time that I spend in a meditative state that I moved into that. Yeah.
Yeah, you nurtured it.
Not on purpose.
No.
But it just happens. But when those things happen, it happened. Like when we were at Standing Rock, Jenna and I were at Standing Rock, and we were in our tent, and all these old native spirits came piling in there. And Jenna started talking. I'm like, shh. Shh. And I'm like, shh. And I was listening to what they were telling me and what they were showing me. And then I went and told them everything that they said.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. They actually showed me the water cannons 5 days before they actually showed up.
Oh.
So I was telling them that I didn't know what it was. I'm like, I called it a swivel weapon, and it sprays something. I didn't know what it was. But yeah, it was very interesting.
Well, that's a beautiful gift, that's a beautiful gift to have. And I do think that so many of us miss out on those gifts because we just don't tune in, and also trust in the process, of nurture you to nurture.
Trust is the biggest part of it. And you've got to be able to trust yourself in order to trust these visions that you're receiving and this information that you're receiving. That was my hardest thing. I still have issues sometimes with trusting myself, but Jenna always says, oh, Jenna, just listen.
Ask questions. Listen, ask questions.
And ask questions.
And I think they start when we're young, and then we're taught that that's not real. You're just making things up, and imagine if we nurtured that ability in our kids, how powerful they would be into adulthood.
Yeah.
I did it time. I'm like, what'd you dream about? I'm like, did you see something? What did it look like?
That's awesome.
I love that.
I do that with my daughter. She sees entities, and she'll be like, oh, ever since she was little, I never said, no, you don't see that. I said, what does it look like? How tall is it? How big is it? Do they look upset? Anytime, because I can see sometimes, but she sees like almost all the time. So I would ask her what she was seeing, and she's amazing.
That's beautiful. Because they say when we reach age 7, sometimes that's when that gift starts to kind of go, if it's not nurtured. They say around that age of 7 years old. So yeah, that's beautiful that you can do that for her. And and I often meet kids where it's like their parents, or either make them feel bad about it, and so it's like, or they are very fear-based and they think that what they're experiencing is something wrong with them. Right.
I've actually worked with some families on the reservation where they called me in to work with the little girl that she was having encounters, and the parents knew that ran in the family, but they had forgotten. And then when the other children started to see shadow people in the house, they got a little scared. So then they asked if I would come over and see what was there. And so I did. And, I said, well, they're here. They're asking for her help. And that's why she feels so responsible for them. She just doesn't know how to help them yet. So, I worked with her and I asked her permission. Can I help them for you? And she had to think about that for a minute, and I just kept going back to the house and helping her through that until she knew how to do it herself. And that's all that she needed. And she needed that support for a few years. And that was it. Now she's good to go.
Yeah. It's
So
to have that support. Like, she's lucky that her parents even reach out to you, because oftentimes, that doesn't even happen.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
They become teenagers and become really like they regress and they become really introverted and become depressed. Like, I've met teenagers that have been dealing with that for years, seen and heard for the gifts that they have. And they're taught that they're not gifts.
And
Right.
High school is absolutely the worst time in a child's life with abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I actually brought a spirit box to their
Oh.
house because the mom and the grandma were there with us, and I thought, if I can get the spirits to talk on the spirit box and they can hear them, they won't be so scared of them. And as soon as the voice came through saying, "Help me," they were instantly, oh, what do they need help with? You could just feel sorry for them as soon as they heard that,
Mm-hmm.
and that took their fear away of it right away.
Well, I love that you ladies are promoting this message so much, because
Yes.
this is healing work. It's really important to be able to open up people's minds to a different point of view than what's
Yeah.
being out there.
And I think it's happening more and more and more right now. That all you need to do is say a word and it spreads like wildfire. I know in my family, we have gifts, but no one ever talked about them until I started saying, okay, I'm just going to say screw it and just say, okay, look, this is what's happening, and all of a sudden my nieces and nephews started coming out. Out
Of the
with their
psychic
gifts.
closet.
Yes. But it does. It just takes one person to be strong enough to say, I have this happening to me, and talk about it. I think it's beautiful.
Me too.
Exactly. It's good stuff, and it's really important for people to know that happens a lot with children, especially, and sometimes what their imaginary friend isn't so imaginary.
Imaginary friends are not imaginary.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a man that was an Ojibwe man from Canada, and he, as a child, was sharing information with his family that his family didn't know, medicines, plant medicines, really, really intricate things. And they're like, how do you know this stuff? And he said that Bigfoot was coming to take him at night and teaching him these things at night in his dreams. And all through growing up, and he's an elder now, and that's where he claims his teachings came from, and his story has never changed.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. I connect with plants in that way. I do plant dieting, and so I'll fast, and I will prepare to ingest just a particular plant, and then in the dream world I actually meet the spirit of the plant.
I love this.
Yeah, and then sometimes you actually begin to embody those medicinal properties that plant has. Yeah.
That is awesome. That reminds me of we went to the Wild Food Summit, and it's like 5 days of camping and gathering wild foods and eating only wild foods. And there was a native elder there from the North Shore of Lake Superior, and she had what we call the spiritual tent, where she just shared stories about the plant nation and our connection with them. It was beautiful. Oh my gosh, we're already at the end of the show. How did that happen? I just looked at the clock. Again, everybody, you can find her book online. What is it called again?
Bigfoot and Lightning Bug.
Bigfoot and Lightning Bug. Please check it out. I'm hoping you'll come back on the show another time with us.
Yeah, we can talk about all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure and a joy.
Thanks for meeting me, ladies. It was nice to meet you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.